Daniel Ross had been hauling cargo across space for 3 years, and customs checkpoints always bored him to tears. The same questions, the same scans, the same tired officials waving him through without a second glance. He stretched his arms above his head as he walked down the white corridor toward the processing center, his boots making soft thuds against the metal floor. Around him, dozens of alien species moved through their own security lines. Some floated, some skittered, some walked on more legs than he could count. Just another day at Viridian 7 Transit Hub. The security officer at the desk had bright blue feathers and eyes that blinked sideways. She barely looked up from her screen as Daniel approached. "Name and origin planet," she said in a flat voice translated instantly by his earpiece. "Daniel Ross, Earth." He handed over his identification card. The officer's feathers ruffled slightly. "Earth, that's the new planet, yes? Joined the trade network 2 years ago?" She scanned his card and gestured toward a booth on her left. "Standard biometric scan. Step inside, wait for the green light, then proceed to Gate 7. Daniel nodded and walked to the booth. It looked like every other scanner he'd been through. A cylinder of translucent material with sensors embedded in the walls. He stepped inside and the door sealed behind him with a soft hiss. A pleasant automated voice spoke in perfect English. "Please remain still. Scanning in progress." Blue light washed over him from floor to ceiling. Daniel waited, thinking about the hot meal he'd buy once he cleared customs. Maybe something with actual vegetables this time instead of the freeze-dried packets on his ship. The scan should take 30 seconds at most. The light turned red. Daniel frowned. That had never happened before. Hello? Is there a problem?" The automated voice didn't respond. Instead, an alarm began to wail. Not just in his booth, but throughout the entire customs area. Daniel pressed his hands against the translucent wall and saw security officers running in every direction. The feathered officer who'd checked him in was shouting into a communication device, her feathers standing straight up. "Hey!" Daniel pounded on the wall. "What's going on?" The door to his booth didn't open. More aliens in uniforms arrived, some carrying equipment he didn't recognize. They set up barriers around his scanner, pushing back the crowd of travelers who'd stopped to stare. Daniel's heart started beating faster. This wasn't normal. This wasn't normal at all. A tall alien who looked vaguely like a praying mantis approached the booth. She wore a white coat with medical symbols on the collar. Her voice came through a speaker. "Human, can you hear me?" "Yes, what's happening?" "Why am I locked in here?" "Please remain calm. I'm Dr. Tellis, Chief Medical Officer of this station. The scanner has detected an anomaly. We need to run additional tests before we can release you." "An anomaly? What kind of anomaly?" "I'm healthy. I passed all the medical checks on Earth before I got my pilot license." Dr. Tellis tilted her triangular head. "The issue is not with your health. The issue is with your planet of origin." She tapped something on a tablet she carried. "The scanner has just updated its planetary database. Earth has been reclassified." Daniel felt cold despite the comfortable temperature in the booth. "Reclassified as what?" Before Dr. Tellis could answer, another alien pushed through the crowd. This one had 4 arms and green-scaled skin. He wore the dark uniform of station security with a badge that read Officer Bryn in multiple languages. "Doctor, we need to evacuate this entire section. If the classification is accurate, we can't have this many people near the subject." "I'm standing right here," Daniel shouted. "I can hear you, subject. What are you talking about?" Officer Bryn's eyes, all 3 of them, fixed on Daniel. "The scanner has classified Earth as a Class 12 Deathworld, the highest danger rating in the Galactic database." The words didn't make sense. Daniel laughed, but it came out nervous and too loud. "Deathworld, Earth? That's crazy. Earth is fine. People live there. Billions of people. That," Dr. Tellis said quietly, "is what concerns us." The crowd behind the barriers grew larger. Daniel could see aliens of every shape and size pressing forward, trying to get a look at him. Some looked curious. Others looked afraid. A small creature covered in fur actually fainted, caught by its companion before it hit the floor. Officer Bryn spoke into his communication device. "This is a Code 7 situation. I need a full quarantine team and a direct line to the Galactic Council." "Yes, I'm serious. We have a Deathworld native in customs." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "I don't care if it sounds impossible. The scanner doesn't lie. It just updated its database after 50,000 years. 50,000 years? Daniel's mind reeled. The scanner hadn't checked Earth since before humans even existed. Before civilization, before cities, before written language. It had scanned Earth when it was nothing but wild animals and natural disasters. And now it had scanned him. "Please," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "There's been a mistake. I'm just a cargo pilot. I deliver medical supplies. I'm not dangerous." Dr. Tellis looked at him with something that might have been pity. "According to this data, your planet has gravity 1.3 times galactic standard. Your atmospheric oxygen levels would be toxic to most species. Your temperature variations would kill 60% of known life forms. And your planet has an active predator population that covers 89% of all ecosystems." She looked up from her tablet. "You evolved in those conditions. Your body adapted to survive them. Do you understand what that means?" Daniel pressed his forehead against the cool wall of the booth. Through the transparent material, he could see more security teams arriving. Someone was setting up medical equipment. Others were assembling what looked like weapons, though he hoped he was wrong about that. His communication device buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket with shaking hands. A message from Captain Hayes, his supervisor back at the shipping company. "Daniel, what the hell is going on?" "I'm getting reports that you've been quarantined. They're saying Earth is some kind of death trap. They're talking about suspending all human trade licenses. Call me immediately." Daniel tried to reply, but the communication device went dead in his hand. They'd cut his signals. Officer Bryn returned to the booth. "The Galactic Council is convening an emergency session. Until they decide what to do about your species, you'll remain in medical quarantine. Dr. Tellis will make sure you're comfortable." "Comfortable? I'm locked in a scanner." "Better than the alternative," Bryn said. His third eye blinked independently of the other two. 3 species in galactic history evolved on Deathworlds. 2 destroyed themselves in wars. The third had to be forcibly contained after they conquered 40 systems. He leaned closer to the booth. Their planet was less extreme than yours. Daniel sank to the floor of the scanner, his legs suddenly weak. This couldn't be happening. He'd just wanted to deliver his cargo and grab a meal. Now he was apparently some kind of monster, because Earth had weather and tigers and mountains. The lights in the scanner shifted to a softer blue. Dr. Tellis's voice came through the speaker again. "Try to rest. This may take a while. The Council doesn't move quickly, and they've never had to deal with something like this before." Through the walls of his prison, Daniel watched as the customs area was completely cleared. Every other traveler was moved to different gates far away from the scary human. Only the security teams and medical staff remained, keeping their distance, watching him like he might explode at any moment. He was alone in a crowd of aliens, trapped in a cylinder of plastic and light, while the entire galaxy decided if humanity was too dangerous to exist. The council chamber looked like something from a dream or maybe a nightmare. Counselor Nim floated in a tank of purple liquid at the center of a circular platform, her translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Around her, representatives from 200 species sat in sections designed for their specific needs. Some breathed methane sealed in glass boxes. Others basked under heat lamps or cooling units. The galaxy's diversity was on full display, and right now, all of it was focused on the problem of humanity. Professor Welks adjusted his glasses with one clawed hand and pulled up the data on the massive holographic display. The reptilian scientist had studied xenobiology for 40 years, but nothing in his education had prepared him for this. "Counselors, what we are seeing is unprecedented. The planetary scanner last updated its database 50,000 years ago. At that time, Earth was logged as moderate risk, presentient wildlife. The system saw a planet with developing ecosystems and cataloged it for future observation. And now, Nim's voice bubbled through her tank's speakers. Welks tapped a control and the display changed. Numbers and graphs filled the air, most of them showing red warning indicators. Now the system has detected a sentient species. It automatically rescanned the planet's environmental parameters and compared them to current galactic standards. He paused. The results triggered an immediate reclassification to Class 12 Deathworld. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A delegate from the silicon-based rendering collective stood up, her crystalline body refracting light in sharp angles. "That classification hasn't been used in 12,000 years. Are you certain the scanner isn't malfunctioning? We ran diagnostics 17 times. Welks brought up a new image of Earth slowly rotating in the holographic field. It looked beautiful. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. The scanner is functioning perfectly. The planet itself is the problem. Nim's patterns shifted to a deep orange, indicating concern.
Explain the specifics, Professor. Welks began highlighting sections of data.
Gravity first. Earth's gravity is 1.3 times galactic standard. For perspective, the Rendering Collective considers anything above 1.1 to be a high-gravity world requiring specialized equipment. He gestured to the Silicon delegate, who had sat back down with a grinding sound.
Humans evolved in this.
They consider it normal. That alone wouldn't justify a Class 12 rating, another counselor called out. No, it wouldn't. But combined with atmospheric composition, it becomes concerning. Welks pulled up a chemical analysis. Earth's atmosphere is 21% oxygen. Galactic standard is 12%. Most species would experience oxygen toxicity within hours of breathing Earth's air. Prolonged exposure causes cellular damage, organ failure, and death. Surely they use filtration systems? Nim asked. No, they breathe it directly. Their entire biology is built around processing what we would consider toxic oxygen levels. Welks switched to another chart. Temperature variations. Earth experiences seasonal shifts of up to 60 degrees standard units in some regions. Daily variations of 20 degrees are common. The planet has regions of extreme cold that would freeze most species solid, and regions of extreme heat that would cause protein breakdown. The chamber had gone quiet. Welks continued, his voice steady but grim. The planet experiences regular natural disasters, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes with wind speeds that would tear most structures apart, floods, droughts, wildfires. And in all of this, life not only survives but thrives. He pulled up footage from Earth's nature documentaries. Things humans had sent to the galactic network as part of their introduction: a lion taking down prey 3 times its size, a bear catching fish from a rushing river, a snake unhinging its jaw to swallow something whole, an orca hunting seals on an ice shelf. Several counselors made distressed noises. One delegate, a small creature covered in delicate scales, actually left the chamber. Predator saturation, Welks said. 89% of Earth's ecosystems contain active predator species. For comparison, most stable planets average 15 to 20%. Earth's food chains are built on constant predation. Everything is either hunting or being hunted, sometimes both simultaneously. Nim's color had shifted to a pale yellow, and humans evolved in this environment. At the top of the food chain, Welks confirmed. They are apex predators, but more than that, they are persistence hunters. Their bodies are designed for endurance. They can run for hours in heat that would kill most species. They can track prey over vast distances. Their eyes are forward-facing, giving them exceptional depth perception for hunting. Their hands can grip and manipulate tools with precision, and their brains developed complex problem-solving specifically to overcome the dangers of their environment. A new figure entered the chamber, walking quickly despite the formal setting. Ambassador Grant from Earth looked tired, his human features showing stress in ways the aliens were only beginning to recognize. He'd been traveling for 6 hours after getting the emergency summons, jumping through 3 relay points to reach the council station. Counselors, he said, slightly out of breath. I came as soon as I received your message. I understand there's been some kind of incident with one of our pilots? Nim's patterns flickered through several colors before settling on neutral blue. Ambassador Grant, thank you for joining us. We have questions about your species and your homeworld. Of course, though I'm confused about why one custom scan has caused such alarm. Welks turned to face the human ambassador. Ambassador, were you aware that Earth is classified as a death world? Grant blinked, the human expression that indicated surprise or confusion. A what? A death world. A planet with environmental conditions so extreme that most galactic species would die within hours or days of exposure. Grant looked around the chamber, seeing the fear and concern on alien faces. In alien body language he was still learning to read. I mean, Earth has some challenging regions, sure. We have deserts and Arctic zones, but most of the planet is perfectly habitable. Billions of us live there without any problems. That, Nim said slowly, is exactly what concerns us. Welks pulled up historical records, documents that humans had never seen before. There have been 3 other death world species in recorded galactic history. The first, the Craven, destroyed themselves in a nuclear war within 50 years of discovering atomic energy. The second, the militants did the same with biological weapons. They were both from Class 8 Deathworlds. He paused, letting that sink in. The third species, the rendered, came from a Class 10 Deathworld. They didn't destroy themselves. They turned outward. They conquered 40 systems before the combined forces of the galactic community could contain them. It took 300 years and cost billions of lives. Ambassador Grant's face had gone pale. You think we're going to do the same? We don't know, Nim said. That's the problem. We've reviewed your history, Ambassador. Your planet has thousands of years of recorded warfare. Your species has developed weapons capable of destroying your entire planet several times over. You have conflicts over resources, territory, ideology. You fight each other constantly. We've had peace for decades now, Grant protested. We have a unified world government. We've moved past those old conflicts. You had a war that killed 50 million people within the last century, Welks said quietly. And that was before you had access to galactic technology. Grant opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. What could he say? The history was there, undeniable. Humanity had been brutal to itself for most of its existence. The rendered's homeworld had gravity of 1.2 standard, Welks continued. Oxygen levels of 18%. Temperature variations of 40 degrees. It was less extreme than Earth in every measurable category. He looked directly at Grant. If they became conquerors from those conditions, what does that make humans? The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates argued in dozens of languages, creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, hums, and sounds that defied human description. Ambassador Grant stood in the center of it all, feeling very small and very far from home. Nim raised her body higher in her tank, a gesture that called for silence. The chamber gradually quieted. We have a human in quarantine at Viridian 7, this Daniel Ross. What do you propose we do with him and with his species? We can't just ban humanity from galactic civilization, one counselor said. They've done nothing wrong. Yet, another countered. The rendered seemed peaceful at first, too. Grant found his voice again. With respect, counselors, you're judging us based on fear, not facts. Yes, Earth is a challenging environment. Yes, we've had conflicts in our past. But we've also learned from those mistakes. We've built cooperation and peace. We chose to reach for the stars not to conquer, but to learn and grow. Pretty words, the Silicon delegate said. The rendered said similar things. Then test us, Grant said firmly. Keep Daniel in quarantine if you must, but study him. See for yourselves what humans are really like. Don't condemn billions based on assumptions and fear. Nim's patterns shifted through multiple colors, thinking. An investigation. Professor Welks, you will oversee testing of the human subject. We need to understand human capabilities and limitations. The Council will reconvene once we have concrete data. Her voice carried the weight of final judgment. Until then, all human trade and transit through galactic space is suspended. Earth is quarantined. Ambassador Grant felt his heart sink, but he nodded. It could have been worse. At least they weren't talking about military action. Yet Daniel had been moved from the scanner to what Dr. Tellis called a containment suite, though it looked more like a prison cell with medical equipment. 3 days had passed since his quarantine began. 3 days of tests and questions and being watched like a lab specimen. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the transparent wall that separated him from the observation room where aliens in protective suits studied him. Constantly. Subject appears restless, one of them. Noted into a recording. Device, I have a name, Daniel muttered, knowing they couldn't hear him through the barrier. Dr. Tellis entered the observation room, her mantis-like form moving with precise mechanical grace. She tapped on a control panel and her voice came through the speaker. Good morning, Daniel. How are you feeling today? Like a zoo animal. How do you think I'm feeling? Irritable. Noted. She made a mark on her tablet. We're going to begin physical testing today. The Council has requested a full assessment of human baseline capabilities. Baseline capabilities? You mean like how strong I am or how fast I can run? Precisely. We need to understand what your species considers normal, so we can properly assess the risk you pose to other species. Daniel stood up. I'm not a risk. I'm a cargo pilot. The most dangerous thing I do is lift heavy boxes. We shall see. Dr. Tellis gestured to a door that slid open on the opposite side of the containment suite. Please proceed to the testing chamber. The chamber was large with various equipment Daniel recognized from gyms back on Earth. weights, treadmills, and some devices he didn't recognize. Several more observers had gathered behind protective barriers watching. Daniel felt his face flush with embarrassment and anger. This was ridiculous. A small furry alien entered through a side door, staying well away from Daniel. Nurse Pip, as her badge identified her, had been the only one to show him any kindness over the past 3 days. She looked like someone had crossed a rabbit with a teddy bear, and she barely came up to Daniel's knee. "Please don't be upset," Pip said, her translated voice high and musical. "They're just scared. Nobody means any harm. Except maybe to me if they decide I'm too dangerous." Pip's large eyes blinked sadly, but she didn't deny it. "Let's start with something simple. Can you lift this weight?" She gestured to a bar with round plates on each end. Daniel walked over and examined it. The weights were marked in Galactic Standard units, which his translator helpfully converted. "This is about 40 pounds. Yeah, I can lift that." He bent down, gripped the bar, and lifted it easily to chest height. The observers made startled noises. One of them dropped their tablet. "Is something wrong?" Daniel asked, still holding the weight. Dr. Tellis's voice came through the speakers, carefully controlled but tight. "That weight requires mechanical assistance for most species. Please set it down." Daniel lowered the bar, confused. "It's not that heavy. I could lift twice this much without any problem." "Please don't." Dr. Tellis made several notes. "Let's try the gravity adjustment platform. Step onto the circular pad, please." Daniel did as instructed. The platform hummed and he felt slightly lighter, like being underwater. The display showed they'd reduced gravity to Galactic Standard, 0.78 times Earth normal. "How does this feel?" Dr. Tellis asked. "Weird. Light. Like I might float away if I jumped." "And you can still move normally?" Daniel demonstrated by walking around the platform, then jogging, then doing a few jumping jacks. "Yeah, it's actually easier than normal." More frantic note-taking from the observers. One of them left the room quickly. Dr. Tellis adjusted the platform again. "Now we're increasing to 1.5 Earth Standard." The weight pressed down on Daniel like a heavy blanket. He had to focus on staying upright and his legs trembled slightly. "Okay, that's uncomfortable. I can handle it for a while, but I wouldn't want to live like this." "Most species would be crushed unconscious at that gravity level," Pip said quietly. "The fact that you're still standing is remarkable." They moved to atmospheric testing next. Daniel was fitted with sensors and asked to breathe different air mixtures. When they reduced oxygen to Galactic Standard 12%, he felt lightheaded and dizzy within minutes. "Yeah, this isn't good," he said, gripping the side of the chamber for balance. "I feel like I just ran a marathon." "And yet you're still conscious," Dr. Tellis observed. "Most humans would be experiencing cognitive impairment by now." "I am experiencing cognitive impairment. Everything's fuzzy. But you're still speaking in complete sentences and maintaining balance. Fascinating." They restored the oxygen and Daniel gratefully sucked in deep breaths. Then they increased it to 25%. Daniel felt energized, almost jittery with excess energy. "I could run forever like this," he said, bouncing slightly on his feet. "Anything above 22% is toxic to most species," Pip said, checking her medical scanner. "Your body is processing it without any distress." The temperature tests were worse. They cooled the chamber to what they called extreme cold, and Daniel stood there in his regular clothes, shivering but functional. When they apologized and began to return the temperature to normal, Daniel asked what temperature they'd used. 15 degrees standard. His translator converted it. "That's about 58 Fahrenheit. That's not extreme cold. That's a cool autumn day." Try actual cold, they did, against the protests of several observers, at what humans would call freezing. Daniel was uncomfortable but still moving and thinking clearly. Dr. Tellis stopped the test when the reading showed temperatures that would literally freeze most species solid. Heat testing was similar. What they considered dangerously hot was a warm summer day to Daniel. When they pushed into what humans considered hot, several of the observers had to leave the observation room to avoid heat stress, even through the protective barriers. 5 hours of testing later, Daniel was exhausted but still functional. The observers looked terrified. "This is impossible," one of them kept repeating. "This is impossible." Daniel was drinking water in his containment suite, trying to recover, when alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors outside his cell. Through the transparent walls, he saw staff running in panic. Dr. Tellis's voice came through the speakers, but she wasn't talking to him. She was shouting to someone else. Life support failure in Section 7. Multiple species trapped. Emergency response teams are overwhelmed. Daniel pressed against the transparent wall.
What's happening?
Oxygen leak combined with temperature spike. The conditions in that section would kill anyone we send in. Dr. Tellis turned to look at him, her alien features unreadable. Anyone except possibly you. Then let me out. That's against protocols. People are dying. Daniel slammed his hand against the barrier. You just spent 5 hours proving I can survive extreme conditions. Let me help. Dr. Tellis hesitated for only a moment before hitting the emergency release. The door to Daniel's cell opened for the first time in 3 days. Daniel ran into the corridor following the emergency lighting. Staff members pressed themselves against walls as he passed, still afraid of the dangerous human. He didn't care. Section 7 was 3 corridors away, and he could already see smoke coming from the damaged area. Officer Bryn was at the entrance to Section 7, trying to coordinate rescue teams that kept falling back from the heat and toxic air. He saw Daniel approaching and raised a weapon. Stop right there. People are trapped in there. Anyone going in there will die within minutes. The oxygen levels alone would cause tissue damage, and the temperature is climbing past survival thresholds for every species on this station. Daniel looked past Bryn into the smoke-filled corridor. He could hear screaming. What's the oxygen level? Bryn checked his scanner. 28% and rising from the leak. And temperature? 105 degrees standard. Bryn's third eye focused on Daniel. That's hot enough to cause protein breakdown in most species. Daniel did the math. 28% oxygen was higher than Earth's atmosphere, but not dangerously so. 105 standard was about 110 Fahrenheit. Hot but survivable. That's a bad day in Arizona. I can handle it. Before Bryn could stop him, Daniel grabbed a wet cloth from an emergency kit and wrapped it around his face. Then he ran into Section 7. The heat hit him like a wall, and the air felt thick and almost sticky in his lungs. Smoke burned his eyes even through the cloth, but he could move. He could breathe. He was conscious and functional. The screaming was coming from a collapsed section where 3 aliens were trapped under debris. Daniel recognized them from around the station. One was a floating species, their gas bladder punctured and leaking. Another was one of the small furry people like Pip. The third was a crystalline being whose structure was fracturing from the heat. Daniel grabbed the debris and lifted. The weight that would have required mechanical assistance for most species. His muscles strained and his back screamed in protest, but the metal beam moved. The trapped aliens scrambled out. Go, Daniel shouted. Get to the exit. He helped carry the injured floating alien, supporting their weight while they struggled to move with their damaged bladder. The small furry person was unconscious from heat stress, so Daniel scooped them up in his other arm. The crystalline being moved on their own, fractures spreading across their body but still mobile. The smoke was getting thicker. Daniel's eyes watered and his lungs ached, but he pushed forward. The exit was ahead, where Officer Bryn stood with his weapon still drawn, looking shocked. Daniel emerged from Section 7, carrying 2 aliens and herding a third. He collapsed to his knees as soon as they were clear, gasping for clean air. Medical teams rushed forward to help the rescued aliens. Dr. Tellis appeared, scanning Daniel with her equipment. You survived conditions that should have killed you. Daniel pulled the cloth away from his face, coughing. I survived a bad day in Arizona. Around them, station staff who had been so afraid of the dangerous human just stared. One by one, they began to see something different. Not a monster from a Deathworld. A person who had run toward danger while everyone else ran away. Professor Welks had not slept in 48 hours, which was concerning for a species that typically required 14 hours of rest per cycle. His office in the Galactic Archives was buried under data files, holographic displays, and half-empty containers of nutrient paste. Somewhere in the chaos was the answer to a question that kept him awake despite his exhaustion. What made humans different from the other Deathworld species? He pulled up the file on the Craven again, reading through their history for the 5th time. They had evolved on a Class 8 Deathworld with higher gravity than standard and aggressive predator species. Within a century of achieving spaceflight capability, they had destroyed themselves in a nuclear war that left their homeworld uninhabitable. The records showed a species driven by territorial aggression, unable to cooperate beyond small family groups. Their social structure had been their downfall. The militants were similar. Class 8 Deathworld, extreme temperature variations, scarce resources. They had learned to create biological weapons to fight their resource wars, and those weapons had gotten out of control. Their planet was now in permanent quarantine, the entire biosphere contaminated beyond recovery. The few survivors lived in sealed colonies, a remnant population of a few thousand from what had once been billions. Then there were the rendered. Welks pulled up their files with a mixture of fascination and dread. Class 10 Deathworld, the worst classification before humans came along. They had been strong, fast, and incredibly intelligent. They had also been conquerors. For 300 years they had spread through 40 systems, subjugating other species with brutal efficiency. It had taken the combined military forces of half the galaxy to contain them. And even then the cost had been devastating. Their homeworld was still inhabited, but the rendered were restricted to their own system, monitored constantly by automated defense stations. They had been given a choice: stay contained or face extinction. They had chosen to stay. Welks looked at the environmental data from the rendered homeworld. Gravity 1.2 standard. Oxygen 18%. Temperature variation 40 degrees. Predator saturation 73%. Then he pulled up Earth's data. Gravity 1.3. Oxygen 21%. Temperature variation 60 degrees. Predator saturation 89%. Earth was worse in every category. So why had humans, after achieving spaceflight, spent their time sending friendly messages and trade requests instead of warships? Why had Daniel Ross run into a burning section to save aliens instead of letting them die? Why did humanity seem different? Director Moss interrupted his thoughts by manifesting near the door. The fungal colony species existed as a distributed intelligence across multiple nodes, and Moss's primary consciousness had grown to fill most of one corner of the office. "Professor, you look terrible." "I feel terrible." Welks gestured at the data surrounding him. "I cannot find the pattern. What makes humans different? Perhaps you are asking the wrong question." Moss's form rippled with thought patterns. "Instead of asking what makes them different, ask what made the others similar." Welks sat back, his tail curling with interest. "Explain." "The craven, the militants, the rendered. All three species evolved to compete. Their social structures were built on dominance and territory. They survived their death worlds by being stronger than everything else around them." Moss shifted to display holographic images from the archive. "Humans evolved differently. Look at their archaeological records. They survived through cooperation. The images showed early human tribes working together to hunt animals much larger than themselves, building shelters together, sharing food, caring for their injured and elderly. Humans are pack hunters," Moss continued. "They evolved to work in groups. Their success on their death world came not from individual strength, but from collective effort. When they faced a challenge too big for one person, they gathered more people." Welks pulled up more human data, seeing it with new understanding. Their wars were not about individual territory, but group conflicts. Tribes against tribes, nations against nations. And despite the violence, they always maintained cooperation within their groups. Exactly. And now Earth has a unified world government. They learned to expand their cooperation from small groups to their entire species. Moss's form brightened. "That is what makes them different. The other Deathworld species never learned cooperation at a large scale. Humans did." A communication alert interrupted them. General Park from Earth Defense Force was requesting a meeting. Welks accepted, and the holographic image of a human military officer appeared in the center of the room. She wore a uniform covered in insignia that Welks had learned to recognize as markers of rank and achievement. "Professor Welks, Director Moss, thank you for taking my call." General Park looked tired but determined. "I understand you're researching human history as part of the Council's investigation." "Yes, we are trying to understand your species." "Then let me save you some time." Park gestured and sent over a data package. "This is our complete military history. Every war, every conflict, every weapon we've developed. No censorship, no hiding the ugly parts. You want to know if we're dangerous? We are. Every species that survives a death world is dangerous. But we're also more than that." Welks opened the files and immediately wished he hadn't. Human warfare was brutal in ways that shocked even his experienced mind. Weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. Tactics that involved deliberate cruelty. Conflicts that killed millions. "I see your reaction," Park said quietly. "Yes, we've done terrible things to each other. We've had periods of history we're not proud of. But here's what the data doesn't show. Every single one of those conflicts ended with humans choosing peace. We fought, we learned, and we stopped fighting. The rendered made similar claims. Welk said carefully, the rendered conquered because they believed they were superior. They saw other species as resources to exploit. Park's face hardened. Humans have done that to each other in our past. We know what it looks like. We know where it leads. That's why we built international laws against it. That's why we created the world government, to prevent any one group from dominating others. Director Moss rippled thoughtfully. You learned from your mistakes. We're still learning. We're not perfect. We probably never will be. Park leaned forward. But we're trying. Every generation of humans teaches the next one that cooperation is better than conflict. We have thousands of years of philosophy and ethics built around the idea that we're stronger together than apart. Welks pulled up more human data, looking at it from this new perspective. Human art, music, literature, all of it filled with themes of working together, of overcoming differences, of choosing compassion over cruelty. Even their entertainment was full of stories about cooperation defeating conflict. Your planet tried to kill you for millions of years, Welk said slowly. And instead of becoming killers, you became protectors of each other. Earth taught us that we're all we've got. When everything around you is trying to kill you, you learn to value every person who stands beside you. Park smiled sadly. That's why Daniel ran into that fire. Not because humans are fearless, but because we've learned that saving others is what makes us worth saving. After Park ended the call, Welks and Moss sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Welks spoke. I need to present this to the council. Will they understand? I do not know. Fear is a powerful motivator. The other Deathworld species left scars on galactic history. Many counselors lost ancestors to the rendered's conquest. Welks looked at the data surrounding him. But we cannot judge humans based on fear alone. We must judge them on evidence. Over the next several days, Welks compiled his report. He included the environmental data, the historical comparisons, and the psychological analysis. He showed how human cooperation had been their survival trait, more important even than their physical adaptations. He documented how human philosophy had evolved toward peace and mutual support. He also included footage from the station incident, showing Daniel Ross carrying injured aliens out of conditions that should have killed him. Other humans had arrived since then as diplomatic staff and assistance personnel. Every one of them had been cooperative, friendly, and eager to help. Counselor Nim reviewed the report in her tank, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through various colors as she processed the information. This is compelling work, Professor, but it still does not answer the fundamental question, can we trust them? Can any species be completely trusted? Welks countered. Every species has capacity for both good and evil. The question is whether humans will choose good more often than evil. And what is your conclusion? Welks looked at the mountain of data he had assembled, thinking about the scared pilot who had been locked in a scanner, the general who had shared her species' darkest secrets without hesitation, the rescue that had turned fear into something else. My conclusion is that humans are dangerous, yes. They evolved in conditions that would kill most of us. They have physical capabilities that seem impossible. They have a history of violence that rivals the worst species in our records. He paused. But they also have something the other Deathworld species lacked. They have empathy that extends beyond their own species. They choose cooperation even when conflict would be easier. They run toward danger to save others. That could change, Nim said. Given time, given power, they could become like the rendered. They could, Welks agreed. Or they could become something better. Something the galaxy has never seen before. A Deathworld species that uses its strength to protect rather than conquer. He met Nim's alien gaze through her tank, but we will never know if we do not give them the chance to prove themselves. Nim's patterns shifted to a deep purple, the color of difficult decisions. I will convene the council again. This time, we will hear from the humans directly. If they want to join galactic civilization, they must make their case not just with words but with actions. They have already begun, Welks said, thinking of Daniel Ross. They just need to be allowed to continue. Viridian 7. Transit hub handled over 10,000 ships per day. A constant flow of trade and travel that made it one of the busiest stations in this sector of space. The station's control center monitored every approach, Every departure, every docking procedure with automated precision that had prevented accidents for 15 years straight. That streak was about to end in the worst possible way. Daniel was in his quarters, no longer locked in containment but still confined to a small section of the station, while the council deliberated. He was reading a message from his sister back on Earth when the entire station shuddered. The lights flickered, and an alarm began to wail, different from the fire alarm he'd heard days before. This one was deeper, more urgent, the kind of sound that meant something very bad had happened. His door opened and Officer Bryn appeared, his three eyes wide with what Daniel had learned to recognize as panic in his species. "We need your help. What happened?" "Cargo vessel had a navigation failure. Crashed into the lower docking ring. We have breaches in 15 sections, fires in the fuel storage area, and toxic chemicals leaking into the environmental systems." Bryn was already moving down the corridor, and Daniel followed. "Emergency teams are overwhelmed. We've got people trapped in conditions that our rescue equipment can't handle." They reached the command center where chaos reigned. Screens showed damage reports from all over the station. Daniel saw civilians running through corridors, some injured, others just trying to escape the danger zones. Station security officers were trying to coordinate evacuations, while damage control teams struggled to reach the worst areas. Ambassador Grant was there, along with Lieutenant Williams, a human Marine who had arrived 2 days ago as part of the diplomatic mission. Williams was already suiting up in emergency gear, moving with the efficiency of someone who had trained for disasters. She looked up as Daniel entered. "Ross, good? We need every human we can get right now." She tossed him a breathing mask and a heat-resistant suit. "Station sections 12 through 18 are contaminated with fuel vapor. One spark and the whole ring goes up. But there are civilians trapped in there, and none of the station crew can survive the chemical exposure." Daniel caught the suit and started putting it on. "How many trapped?" "At least 40, maybe more. Most of them are in the shopping district that runs through those sections." Williams checked her equipment. "The station crew can guide us through communication, but they can't go in themselves. It's just us." Officer Bryn pulled up a map of the affected area. "The fuel is creating an oxygen-depleted atmosphere. Combined with the chemical vapor, it's lethal to every species on this station within minutes." "Except humans," Daniel said, understanding. "We evolved in oxygen-rich environments. We can handle lower oxygen better than most species." "And the chemicals?" Bryn asked, his voice skeptical. Williams shrugged. "Earth has industrial accidents all the time. Humans work in chemical plants, refineries, hazardous material sites. We've got protective equipment designed for this kind of thing." She gestured to the suits. "These might be overkill by our standards, but better safe than sorry." 3 more humans arrived. Captain Hayes from Daniel's shipping company, who had been waiting at the station, hoping to get clearance for his ship, and 2 crew members from another human vessel. All of them started gearing up without hesitation. Dr. Tellis entered the command center, her mantis-like form moving in agitation. "This is extremely dangerous. I cannot authorize humans to enter those sections without proper testing of the environmental conditions against your species. People are dying right now," Williams said flatly. "We don't have time for testing. Either let us help or stand aside and watch them die." Counselor Nim's voice came through the communication system, transmitted from the council station. "Dr. Tellis authorized the humans to proceed. We will discuss the implications later." The rescue operation began with military precision. Williams took command naturally, organizing the humans into 2 teams. Daniel found himself paired with Captain Hayes, moving through the station toward Section 12. Station security cleared their path, though most of them looked at the humans with a mixture of hope and fear. The entrance to Section 12 was marked with emergency barriers and warning signs in multiple languages. Through the transparent doors, Daniel could see hazy air thick with chemical vapor. His suit's air supply activated as they crossed the threshold. The shopping district was a disaster. Storefronts had been damaged by the impact, their contents scattered across the walkways. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. And throughout it all, Daniel could hear voices calling for help in languages his translators struggled to interpret as panic garbled the words. He and Hayes moved quickly, checking each location methodically. They found a family of 4 armed aliens huddled in a damaged shop, barely conscious from chemical exposure. Daniel lifted 2 of them while Hayes carried the other 2. They were heavier than they looked, but manageable. They brought them back to the safe zone where station medical teams waited. Section 12 clear, moving to 13, Williams reported over the communication channel. Section 13 was worse. The fuel leak was stronger here, creating a slippery film on every surface. Daniel's boots struggled for traction. They found a group of civilians trapped behind a collapsed wall, some injured from falling debris. Captain Hayes used his strength to shift the rubble while Daniel pulled the injured aliens free. One of them, a small creature covered in delicate scales, had stopped breathing. Daniel didn't think. He started CPR the way he'd been trained in basic first aid. Chest compressions, rescue breaths, maintaining the rhythm. The alien's anatomy was different from humans, but the basic principle was the same. Keep the blood moving. Keep oxygen flowing to the brain. After 2 minutes that felt like hours, the alien gasped and started breathing again. Daniel carefully lifted them and carried them toward safety, his arms shaking with exhaustion but holding firm. The other human teams were reporting similar scenarios throughout the affected sections. Civilians found and rescued from conditions that station security couldn't reach. The chemical exposure that would kill most species was merely unpleasant for humans in protective suits. Then Williams called out over the communication channel, her voice tight with stress. "I've got a problem in Section 17. There's a fire blocking the main corridor, and I've got at least 20 civilians trapped on the other side. The station's fire suppression system failed in this area." Daniel and Hayes made their way to Section 17, joining Williams and the 2 crew members. The fire was intense, burning through the chemical vapors and creating a wall of flame that reached across the entire corridor. Through the flames, they could see trapped civilians, some of them children of their respective species. "We can't go through that," one of the crew members said. "The suits will protect us from chemicals, but not direct flame. Then we go around." Williams studied the station map on her wrist display. "There's a maintenance shaft that runs parallel to this corridor. It'll be tight, but we can bypass the fire." "That shaft goes through the fuel storage area," Hayes said. "If there's any leak in there, we'll be walking into an explosion waiting to happen. You have a better idea?" They didn't. The maintenance shaft was cramped and dark, lit only by their helmet lights. Daniel went first because he was the smallest of the humans. The smell of fuel was overpowering even through his suit's filters. Every step could be the one that created a spark, that triggered the explosion that killed them all. But those civilians were depending on them, so Daniel kept moving. They emerged behind the trapped group, startling several aliens who had given up hope of rescue. Williams immediately started organizing the evacuation, directing civilians toward safety with calm authority. Daniel helped carry those 2 injured or young to move quickly. The last one out was Officer Bryn himself, who had entered the danger zone against orders to help coordinate the evacuation. His protective suit had torn on the debris and he was struggling with chemical exposure. Daniel grabbed him and ran, feeling the alien's weight pulling at his tired muscles. He didn't stop until they were back in the safe zone, where he practically threw Bryn at the medical team before collapsing against a wall. Dr. Tellis appeared beside him, scanning him with her medical equipment. "You exceeded safe operational limits by almost 40%. Your body should be shutting down from exhaustion." "Yeah, well, I'll rest when everyone's safe." Daniel pushed himself up and headed back into the danger zone before anyone could stop him. For 6 hours, the humans worked. They entered sections that would kill other species. They lifted debris that required mechanical assistance. They carried injured civilians through conditions that seemed impossible. And slowly, steadily, they cleared every section. When the last civilian was brought to safety, Daniel finally allowed himself to stop. He sat down right there in the corridor, too tired to walk another step. Around him, station personnel stared at the humans with open wonder. Williams pulled off her helmet, her face streaked with sweat and soot. 63 civilians rescued. 0 human casualties. Not bad for a day's work. Captain Hayes sat down beside Daniel. "You know the entire galaxy was watching, right? The station broadcasted the whole thing." Daniel looked up and saw the security cameras mounted in the ceiling. Somewhere, on countless worlds, aliens had watched humans run into conditions that would kill them, watched humans save lives at risk of their own, watched Deathworld monsters act like heroes. Nurse Pip approached carefully, holding medical supplies in her small furry hands. She looked up at Daniel with her large eyes. "Thank you. My cousin was in Section 14. You saved her life. Daniel managed a tired smile, just doing what anyone would do. No, Pip said quietly. Doing what only humans could do. And choosing to do it even though you didn't have to. That's the difference. Officer Bryn approached, walking stiffly from his injuries. His 3 eyes focused on Daniel with an expression that seemed like respect. I was wrong about your species. We all were. You were scared. That's understandable. But we should not have let fear blind us to your character. Bryn extended one of his hands in the human gesture of greeting that he'd learned. On behalf of Viridian 7 Station, thank you. Daniel shook his hand, feeling the difference in texture and temperature, but also feeling something more important, the beginning of understanding between species who had feared each other just days before. The council chambers had never been so full. Representatives from all 200 member species were present, not as holographic projections but in person. This decision was too important for remote attendance. The gallery seats were packed with observers, journalists, and citizens who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness this moment. In the center of it all, Counselor Nim floated in her tank, her bioluminescent pattern cycling through colors that indicated deep thought. Daniel stood in the speaker's area, wearing a clean uniform provided by Ambassador Grant. He felt small in this massive space, surrounded by beings who could decide the fate of his entire species. Lieutenant Williams stood beside him as support, her military bearing giving him confidence. Behind them, Professor Welks waited with his compiled research, ready to present his findings. The rescue operation at Viridian 7 had been broadcast across the galactic network. Every species had watched humans enter lethal conditions to save alien lives. Public opinion had shifted dramatically in just a few days, but the council still needed to make an official decision. Fear and gratitude were fighting for dominance in the collective galactic consciousness. Nim's voice carried through the chamber, amplified so all could hear. This council convenes to make final determination on the status of humanity and their homeworld Earth. We have reviewed the evidence, witnessed their actions, and consulted our historical records. Professor Welks, please present your findings. Welks stepped forward, his reptilian features set in an expression of scholarly determination. The holographic displays activated, showing Earth rotating peacefully in the center of the chamber. Counselors, fellow beings, we stand at a unique moment in galactic history. For the first time, we have encountered a Deathworld species that may not follow the tragic pattern of their predecessors. He pulled up environmental data, letting the numbers speak for themselves. Earth is indeed a Class 12 Deathworld, more extreme than any planet that has produced sentient life in our records. The gravity, atmosphere, temperature variations, and predator saturation all exceed previous classifications. By every objective measure, humans should be the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever known. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably in their specialized seats. However, Welks continued, his voice growing stronger. Danger and threat are not the same thing. A sharp blade is dangerous, but whether it threatens you depends on who holds it and how they choose to use it. He displayed footage from Viridian 7, showing humans racing into burning sections while others fled. Humans are dangerous because Earth made them strong. But Earth also made them something else, cooperative, empathetic, and willing to sacrifice themselves for others. He showed the archaeological evidence of early human tribes, the historical records of their social development, the philosophy and ethics they had built over thousands of years. The other Deathworld species survived through dominance and aggression. Humans survived through cooperation and mutual support. This fundamental difference in their evolutionary psychology makes them unique. Ambassador Grant stepped forward when Welks finished. Counselors, my species knows we come from a harsh world. We know we're physically stronger and more resilient than most galactic species. We're not here to deny those facts. He gestured to the holographic Earth. But we're also not defined solely by our environment. We chose who we want to be. Earth taught us to survive. But we chose to do more than just survive. We chose to build civilizations that value cooperation over conquest. We chose to create art, philosophy, and science dedicated to understanding and helping others. The Silicon delegate from the Rendering Collective stood, her crystalline body refracting light harshly. Pretty words, Ambassador. But the Rendered said similar things in their early days. They claimed to come in peace. They claimed to want cooperation. Then they showed their true nature and conquered 40 systems. How can we be certain humans won't do the same once you're given access to galactic technology and power? Grant met her gaze steadily. You can't be certain. No one can predict the future with absolute certainty. All we can do is show you who we are now and trust that our actions speak louder than your fears. Not good enough, another counselor called out. We cannot risk another conquest war. Neem's pattern shifted to a neutral blue, calling for calm. Perhaps we should hear from the human who started this situation. Daniel Ross, you have been at the center of these events. Speak to us. Tell us what humans are. Daniel's mouth went dry. He'd been a cargo pilot 2 weeks ago, and now he was supposed to explain his entire species to the galactic government. He looked at Williams, who nodded encouragingly. He looked at Dr. Tellis in the gallery and at Nurse Pip beside her. He thought about Officer Bryn, who had gone from pointing weapons at him to shaking his hand. He stepped forward and spoke, his voice shaking at first but growing steadier. I'm not a diplomat or a philosopher. I'm just a guy who delivers cargo for a living. But I can tell you what it means to be human. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Earth tried to kill us for millions of years. Every day was a fight to survive. The weather, the animals, the diseases, all of it. We had 2 choices, become stronger or die. We chose to become stronger. He gestured to the rotating image of Earth. But strength alone wasn't enough. One human against Earth's dangers would always lose. So we learned that we needed each other. We learned that working together made us all stronger. We learned that taking care of the weak and injured meant they could help us later when we needed it. We learned that teaching our children about danger kept them alive to have their own children. Daniel's voice grew more passionate. Every human culture everywhere on Earth developed the same basic idea. We're better together than apart. We have thousands of languages, hundreds of religions, millions of different traditions, but that one idea shows up in all of them. Take care of each other. Protect the group. Nobody gets left behind. He looked around at the assembled aliens, meeting as many eyes as he could. Yeah, we've fought wars. We've hurt each other. We've done terrible things to our own species. But we've also spent just as much time creating laws against those things. Philosophies that condemn them. Stories that teach our children why cooperation is better than conflict. Every generation tries to be better than the last. He thought about running into Section 7 at Viridian 7, about carrying injured aliens through conditions that should have killed him. When I ran into that burning section to save those people, I wasn't thinking about them being aliens. I just heard someone screaming for help, and every instinct I have said to help them. That's what Earth taught us. That's what being human means. We see danger and we run toward it if someone needs help. The chamber was silent. Daniel felt exposed, vulnerable, like he'd just opened his chest and shown everyone his beating heart. But he kept going. You're afraid we'll become conquerors because we're strong. I get that. The other Deathworld species did terrible things, but they were strong alone. We're only strong together, and we've learned over thousands of years that conquering others makes us weaker, not stronger. Taking away someone's freedom makes them hate you. Making them your partner makes them your friend. He gestured to the gallery where station personnel from Viridian 7 sat, including Officer Bryn and Nurse Pip. Those people don't trust us because we forced them to. They trust us because we proved ourselves. We showed them who we are through our actions. That's all we're asking for. Judge us by what we do, not by what you fear we might become. Daniel stepped back, his part done. Ambassador Grant took over again. The Galactic Council has 3 options before them. First, ban humanity from galactic civilization and quarantine Earth. This would be safe, but it would also deprive the galaxy of what we can offer. Second, grant us limited access, keeping us under constant monitoring and restrictions. This would be cautious but insulting, treating us like criminals for crimes we haven't committed. Third, grant us full membership and judge us the same way you judge every other species, by our individual actions, not by assumptions. We understand your fears, Grant continued. We're asking you to look past those fears and see us as we are. We're asking for a chance to prove ourselves. And if we fail, if we become the monsters you fear, then you can act against us the same way you act against any species that breaks galactic law, but give us the chance to succeed first. Counselor Nim's patterns cycled through multiple colors as she consulted with her fellow counselors through private channels. The chamber waited in tense silence. Finally, her pattern settled on a deep purple that indicated a decision had been reached. The council has deliberated. We have reviewed the evidence, witnessed human actions, and considered both the risks and benefits of your inclusion in galactic civilization." Nim paused, and Daniel held his breath. "We have decided that humans will be granted full membership status in the galactic community, with one modification to your classification." She gestured, and the holographic displays changed. The scanner data updated, showing new categories. Earth will remain classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, because the environmental facts are undeniable. However, we are creating a new designation for species originating from such worlds. Humans are classified as Deathworld Origin, Specialized Integration Status. Professor Welk stepped forward to explain. "This means humans are recognized as having unique capabilities that developed from your extreme environment. Rather than seeing this as purely dangerous, we acknowledge that these capabilities have value to galactic civilization. You will be granted full citizenship rights, but we also request your species' assistance in situations that exceed standard operational parameters." "Emergency response," Ambassador Grant said, understanding immediately. "Exactly. When disasters occur in conditions too extreme for most species to handle, we would call on humans to assist. Your strength, endurance, and ability to function in hostile environments could save countless lives across the galaxy." Williams grinned beside Daniel. "You're asking us to be first responders for the whole galaxy?" "If you are willing," Nim said. "This would be voluntary, of course, but it would allow humans to prove yourselves through continued action rather than just words." Ambassador Grant looked at Daniel, at Williams, at the other humans in the chamber. Then he turned back to the council. "On behalf of humanity, we accept. We'll help wherever and whenever we're needed." The chamber erupted in discussion, some voices raised in celebration, others still concerned. But the decision had been made. Humanity was no longer a threat to be contained, but a member of galactic civilization, valued for their unique abilities. Daniel felt tears on his cheeks and didn't bother to hide them. He'd been locked in a scanner 2 weeks ago, terrified that humanity would be banned from the stars. Now they were not just accepted, but needed. Officer Bryn approached after the official proceedings ended, pushing through the crowd. "I owe you an apology, Daniel Ross. I treated you as a threat when I should have seen you as a potential ally. You were protecting your station, I understand. Still, I was wrong." Bryn extended his hand again in the human gesture. "I hope humans will remember that not all of us were welcoming at first, but many of us are grateful you came anyway." Daniel shook his hand. "We remember that you changed your mind when given reason to. That's all anyone can ask for." Later, Daniel returned to his ship to finally complete his original cargo delivery. The medical supplies he'd been hauling were still needed at their destination. The customs officer at the gate was different from the one who'd processed him 2 weeks ago, but the procedure was the same. "Scan identification, verify cargo, authorize departure." As Daniel walked through the scanner, he watched the display screens above the booth. The automated system ran its protocols, checking his biometrics, confirming his identity, verifying his clearance. Then the screen updated with his classification. Species, human origin, Earth, Class 12 Deathworld status, allied species, specialized integration clearance, approved for all standard trade routes. Daniel smiled and collected his identification card. The scanner had classified him correctly now. Not as a threat, not as a monster, but as what he'd always been, just a person trying to help. As his ship departed Viridian 7, Daniel looked back at the station through his viewport. More human ships were arriving already, carrying emergency response teams, medical specialists, and engineers. The galaxy had been afraid of what humans might become. Now they were finding out what humans chose to be: helpers, protectors, and friends to any species that needed them. Earth had tried to kill humanity for millions of years. Instead, it had made them strong enough to protect everyone else. And that made all the difference.